My name is Sam Farrazaino, and I am with Equinox Studios down in sunny West Georgetown. If you've never been down to Georgetown, you should come on down. It is the vacation paradise. Equinox, we're going to give a little bit of a. Oh, hi Gus, come on in. We're going to give just a little bit of a touch on each of the work that we're doing. And then kind of jump into a conversation about how we can, as a community, figure out how to stay here. So Equinox Studios is a complex of about 125 different artists and artisans in 4 different buildings. We're just under 100,000 square feet of workspace. And we're 100% tenant owned. So every tenant, just by paying their rent, becomes an owner in the whole complex. And we believe that through that combined community ownership and our expansion, if we can keep growing, we will be able to hold that space for a long time. Keep it out of the claws of gentrification and really try to steer the neighborhood in the direction that we want to go as a community. So that's Equinox, and I'm going to pass it off to Kathleen from Homestead Community Land Trust.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, so I'm the executive director. I'm Kathleen Hosfeld. I'm the executive director of Homestead Community Land Trust. Homestead was founded in 1992 by 12 very diverse citizen activists who created a membership-based, democratically organized and governed organization to acquire land and housing to benefit modest income people. So we, as if you know the Community Land Trust model, we acquire or build new homes for ownership for modest income people. They own the structure, they purchase the structure, and the land under all of our homes is collectively owned by our members through the homestead structure. So our primary members are our homeowners, and they control who is on our board. They elect our officers of the board and make key decisions as provided for in our bylaws. We have about 215 homes in our portfolio right now, and we think that's a good start, but it's not nearly enough. One of our strategies that we've been trying to implement in the last year or 2 years or so to scale the Community Land Trust was to create the network for community-led housing. We've been approached by several neighborhoods, communities of color that have asked for help building housing in their neighborhoods, and we very much want to be able to provide the technical assistance and support to do that. We have been able to just bootstrap giving ours to a partnership that we have with Africatown Community Land Trust, but would like to be able to do that more with more neighborhood groups. So that's essentially Homestead Community Land Trust. Oh, I should say, the reason that we focus on homeownership and put a priority on that is because we are trying to repair the damage done by hundreds of years of discrimination that have prevented people from ownership. And we have 55% minority ownership of our homes, which is still not what we could do, but it's better than the 35% minority ownership rate in King County in general. So we look forward to partnering with all kinds of groups to help support community-led housing going forward.
And I have a couple of friends that live in a couple of your properties. And and they're people of color, by the way.
Yes.
Doing our part. Yeah. Hi, I'm Karen Toering. I am a partner in the Black and Tan Hall, which is a restaurant, community art space, and education space that's located just 1 block north of Orcas on Rainier Avenue. And the Black and Tan is unique in a lot of different ways. Number one, it's community based. So basically we have 35 folks from the neighborhood who came together to create this space, and each of our partners has an equal say in how the businesses run, how the organization grows and is structured. And we came into the model as a for-profit because, this term ownership is now, I'm having a little bit of tension with that, particularly after our original conversation, when we're talking about owning something on stolen land. So I'm going to use the term ownership, but I just want to put that asterisk on it, is that, this is a construct, this owning land. And I understand that, our partners understand that. And, the short version of what we are trying to do is what we call an anti-gentrification model for community ownership of cultural space. And I'll talk a little bit more about the organization and some of our goals as the conversation continues.
Hello, everyone. I'm Uche Okezie. I work with Homesight. We're a community development corporation based in the Rainier Valley. We have offices in Columbia City, where we've been since 1994, although our organization started in 1990, and then we moved to our current space, and we've recently opened another office at Othello and Martin Luther King for our homeownership center.
I'm trying to be one of them homeowners.
Yay.
And so what we've done throughout our history is build homes for purchase for income qualified individual families and households that are earning, first-time home buyers earning less than 80%, at 80% or less than 80% of the area median income for whichever jurisdiction it is, because we've done some work in Seattle, we've built some homes in Snohomish County, and we've also built some homes in White Center. And then our homeownership center arm offers affordable first mortgage products, down payment assistance for income qualified buyers, as well as home buyer counseling. And right now we are leading a community-driven project in the Othello neighborhood called Othello Square. We've been working with the community, I think really since 2009, when the Othello neighborhood developed their neighborhood plan, and that is the vision that has been driving this particular project. We have done our best to respond to what it is that the community wanted. We've held several community meetings and are ongoing in terms of having the community be the advisory board to help us as we continue to develop the project. And right now we have a charter high school that will be opening on that at that space. It's at Othello and Martin Luther King, that big empty lot that's across the street from the Safeway. And so we have that. We have an affordable cooperative housing homeownership development that will start construction in August, and also a community clinic. The Odessa Brown Children's Clinic will be expanding and opening another clinic on that space. We will also be opening early childhood development classrooms there. And then in our the bigger building that will be along Martin Luther King will be a community-owned space for community-based development, community-based organizations, including the Multicultural Community Coalition, SPIN, which is STEM Paths Innovation Network, which focuses on STEM education for youth. And now they're expanding their programs to adult learners as well. And then also opening a space for providing technical assistance for burgeoning entrepreneurs, people who are either already entrepreneurs and are looking for more technical assistance to keep their business, and those who are looking to open their business as well.
Thank you. Gus, you want to tell us in a few minutes about your 800 years of community service?
975. It's really interesting because I've been involved in both national and international. Some people heard me tell a story yesterday about how my grandmother, whose mother was a slave, moved from Virginia to Pittsburgh, where she had relatives, and then to Rochester, New York. But even though she walked out of school in the 4th grade after going to school late one day in Virginia picking cotton and walked into her schoolroom late and a white teacher slapped her, she walked out and never went back. She became an avid reader. She started taking me to see Paul Robeson and Marian Anderson when I was 5 years old. What I say, I continue to recognize that change has to come through community, and no one of us knows it all. I hear a lot of people talking about, well, you know, I run this and I'm doing affordable housing here and there and whatever else. But what is considered affordable housing in the United States is not true, because 70% of heads of households in these poor communities are single females who manage their children, work 2 or 3 jobs, and the various kinds of things. So if you don't have all the data and all the analysis, you're not truly providing for people what they really need. When I did the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, community asked us, they said, you go find us a kind of housing that fulfills what we need. And then once we got it, we took each individual and did an analysis on their income and what they could do, so that we could not only get subsidies to write down the cost and everything else, but made sure it fitted what they needed. That was Community Land Trust that she talked about. I later ran the Institute for Community Economics, the National Community Land Trust Organization. Land trust comes from Mahatma Gandhi, who first founded land trust for people who were victims of the caste system in India. And then it moved to Israel when the kibbutz were started. And the first land trust in this country was in Southwest Georgia, Albany, New Communities, which I served on the board of. And Martin Luther King's uncle and various other people went to Israel to get the analysis and the financing and all these kinds of things. These problems didn't happen yesterday. They won't be corrected tomorrow. And I constantly say to people is that history is not truly recorded in these United States. It's propaganda. I mean, who was the father of our country? George Washington. George Washington owned 60 slaves. Martha brought another 180 when they got married. Is that ever talked about? No, what's talked about in history. I'll never tell a lie. I did cut down a cherry tree. See, that's the kind of thing that is disheartening and is not educational. We're now 47th in the world in literacy and education, 73rd in healthcare, because 30% of all medical doctors today, 70%, I'll take that back, are specialists. Only 30% are general doctors, because the specialists make more money and whatever else. If we don't get that depth of analysis to look at what we got to do to make the necessary changes, we can't recorrect these communities so that we can all learn to live side by side. Because the powers that be will perpetuate NIMBYism through public policy, etc., no matter what. When I first became the mayor of Berkeley, what we were doing then, because in California, there's things called ballot initiatives. I don't know if you can do that in Washington. And we put ballot initiatives on to replace existing public policy temporarily. When we got control of the office, then we began creating public policy that looked at what was in the best interest of people. Berkeley had the strongest rent control in the country when I was in office, because we got Lawrence Tribe, who was on faculty at Harvard then, took our rent control all the way to the Supreme Court and based it on 1% of CPI. We could pass commercial rent control for small businesses because we saw places like Amazon and other places coming and taking over all these things. And there was a small pharmacy, and a woman who had a child with Down syndrome, this pharmacy treated everybody in there, treated her child real well. There was a little ice cream stand and everything and whatever else. And she thought once they got lost, her kid would not have the kind of sincerity and assistance he needed. Well, we had a sister city with Perugia in Italy, and I had just been to the Festival de Unidas, which is the Italian Communist Party. They have a 30-day set every year. Books, discussions like this, etc., whatever else. And the head of the Italian Communist Party, and who was in labor, made a film that talked about why they created commercial rent control so the small businesses could exist. When we passed that commercial rent control, these small businesses were able to buy their own businesses and be commonly competitive, etc., whatever else. The problem is we look at things individually, step by step, single thing, and we're all victims of such a wide breadth of public policy, bad fares, informative education, etc., whatever else. History told incorrectly and whatever else. But I'm proud to see all the things you all are doing. I only hope it's including community and it's working across lines to look at how we develop a baseline society that benefits all of us, that also strengthens our schools, pays teachers what they should be paying, not the administrators, so that we can raise the quality of life in a future that's going to benefit all of us.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, hear, hear. That's an interesting question. Thinking each of the things we've done, Dudley Street Land Trust, the projects we're working on now. How do you all see the things that you've done strengthening communities, giving them the chutzpah or the wherewithal to actually come from all of this that we're suffering from our past, from our history, and get into the current day and have enough energy left to actually go forward? Anybody want to take that on?
Say it again.
Just looking at, like, how does the community land trust model strengthen communities? How does it bring people together and give them the wherewithal to be able to make a difference going forward?
Community land trusts are a tool. So they are a powerful tool. And I like to say that through Homestead, we are creating an alternate economy for housing. And in certain circumstances, I like to lean close to the mic and say, I'm going to let you in on a secret. We're creating an alternate economy for housing. It's true. If we collectively as a community put more and more land into community land trust ownership and artificially restrict the appreciation of that land, we will create an alternate economy for housing in Seattle. So community land trust model is a tool, and the more we can engage people as members in our community land trust, the more powerful that tool can be. So I think that's my response to that question.
Karen, what about your members? Like, when you consider how you came together, what does that look like to build it?
Okay, that was crazy. How many people are, or I would say, this is ageist to say, are old enough to remember our gang? Y'all remember who remembers that? That whole like, hey, we're gonna put on a show. Well, that's how we started. You know, it was just a group of folks in the community that there was this opportunity to get into a space relatively easy. It was owned by another member of the community, and we had this idea that we were just going to throw some paint on the walls and open up a space, and if we build it, they will come. They will come in droves. They will come. They will do art. They will eat our beautiful food. They will, families, all of that kind of stuff. And that was 3 years ago. And I think the thing that we have learned with me and our 34 other partners is this is about relationships. At the end of the day, it's just about relationships. I mean, you know, the thing that's going to topple capitalism is relationships.
Amen.
And so, you know, our story is really detailed, and the words sometimes fraught, mostly joyful. But I think as partners, we're all just really learning what it is to be in partnership, in right relationship, in authentic relationship with each other. And that's not easy. But, if you look at nature, if you look at organisms, it's the power of the collective that makes us strong. Strong against anything. Strong against capitalism. Strong against hate. Strong against all the things, our aspirational selves, who we want to be. I think is what we are learning is just really based on, being truthful with each other, and some kind of elasticity that has to happen when, if you really gonna be working together with people, really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Uche, in your shared ownership model, the forgive me if I get this wrong, limited equity partnership, co-op. We were talking the other day, and it's 68 people that are going to own this together.
Household, yep.
68 households. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And kind of, to me, what's really interesting there is 68 people that come together to own a building, that the power of that community can balance the money of a developer building their own building over here, and what that difference is, like how you see that power coming together.
So I was thinking about your question earlier, and we've always focused on the individual. Your comment about focusing on individual, how that's been the common paradigm. You do for yourself, you do for your family. But with this particular model, because we're hoping that this cooperative will give people the opportunity to become homeowners, but it isn't about how much wealth that you'll be able to accumulate with this particular, with the unit that you purchase. It's about, the focus is on community. The focus is on building relationships with the people that you're living with, because you all have to make decisions about how to make this this cooperative, this building, this place where people live and gather, be successful. And that is the asset that you're building, because the asset actually remains with the building and the land, and really the people that are owning are really, we were talking about this earlier, stewards of that land, and making it, and having the cap on the amount of wealth that you can build with this particular unit. In that way, if it passes on to someone else, they also can still afford it. And so that's sort of the model that we're following, and we're hoping that, because the emphasis is not on how much wealth you're building, but how much community and relationships that you're building, we are able to change that model, change the focus that people are having in terms of what's really important, where their priorities lie, what it is that they're really trying to build, and what success means.
Awesome. Yes. Gus, how about in Dudley Street, like the power of that community coming together?
Dudley Street was the best example of total community development that I've ever participated in. As you know, Dudley Street is the only nonprofit organization in the history of this country ever to get the power of eminent domain. And that's because on the books in Massachusetts, going back to the 1860s, that legislation was passed, and for some reason, I don't know why, no politician to this day has wiped that out. But they never figured that anybody could get it, I think, is why it happened. The people in Dudley Street, many of them have been forced from one neighborhood to another, because every time gentrification comes, they go someplace else and they say we're going to build affordable housing and all these people are going to be able to come back. That's a damn lie. Just look at what gentrification does and then see how many of the people that got pushed out of there are able to go back. And that's going to be true, and Central Town, etc., whatever else. And so the people in Dudley Street who had gotten forced out of the North Boston, South Boston, said to us, they said, look, we want to some way stabilize and get the kinds of housing in the kind of community that we can maintain control. And Steve Coyle, who was head of the redevelopment agency, who was both an architect and a lawyer, called me and we began going to have a little glass of wine every night. Now that was a hard task, but I accepted it. And Steve said, look, you all should go after eminent domain. It's on the books. And I said, what does that take? He said, you got to get a master plan. And so we've been working with MIT, the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and they've been gathering the data for us and everything else about the negative causes, what worked, put together GIS maps so that we could then educate community, educators, small business, bankers, and everybody to understand those different conditions. And then we started working with a lot of, especially the single women, go door to door to identify what things most did in community like and what they appreciate, what they most dislike, because in poor communities, you'll find a lot of vacant land where developers use it for illegal dumping because there's no political clout. That was the main thing people didn't like. You dump all this debris, it brings rodents, bad smell, etc. So we had to find a way to challenge downtown to get these illegal dumpers and developers cited. The mayor said he wanted to be the mayor of the community, so when he was running for re-election, a lot of people used to also take dead cars and dump them right on our communities. We went down to his campaign office and got 2,000 bumper stickers and put them on the bumpers with all those dead cars and called the media. And the mayor said, God damn, these people are organized. You know, look at this. So we were able to tow those cars. And then the next thing we did was got the city, a lot of these vacant lands they own, to send trucks down and rakes and everything so we could clean all that up on weekends, have a little barbecue and some music at night. And as soon as we got them cleaned up, we planted wildflowers. Where there was blight, there becomes beauty. That is spiritual. That is the short-term accomplishment that communities need to see, to understand that things can go further. And then we began with that data we had, recognizing, well, we need more than housing. We need good jobs. There was a lot of biotechnology coming around that area. We went to a two-year college and said, we want you to set up a class to train people for lab technicians, because for every one microbiologist, you need 3 lab technicians. We also looked at where jobs were on the other side on Route 108. So we worked with public transportation to make sure that there was transportation to get people to those jobs. We also were able to take over the schools. We began working with people, the university, whatever, to write our own curriculum and to bring in some of the best teachers in the city. Our young people started graduating, getting scholarships to Dartmouth, to Harvard, and all those schools. And unlike what young people usually do, they came back. By this time, the land trusts were being built. Some of their families were being stabilized. And these were all communities. I mean, we had a lot of people from Cape Verde, from Puerto Rico, from the Caribbean, blacks from down south, and a certain percentage of white people. But rather than to divvy up things, like we said, we gave 4 seats to each ethnic group on our board. And we finally lowered the voting age to 15 so the young people could put and get on it and whatever else. And when the young people began to look at what they could do to help, they started planting flowers. Graduate classes from some of the major universities come down in the summer and plant trees because of the environment, etc., whatever else, to keep the gases out and all kinds of things as that. It takes a total picture. You can't, that's what I'm talking about when I say you can't focus on one thing. That housing thing by itself is not enough. It's not sufficient. We got to look at, you know, people being able to live a living, the next generation who's going to be our next leaders. We got to get public policy that's going to really change this and that, because everything you're doing right now is within the existing public policy, which means that which they practiced historically, they're practicing today. That's why gentrification is going on. I mean, Seattle's known as a city that has more cranes in the sky than any city in these United States. And why is that? Because who's controlling development? Developers, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., whatever else. You've got to get organized to get in their mindsets to let them know it's not going to happen what they want to do without us working together for the best interest of all. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm just an old country boy. I get to go and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. You did. I think that brings an interesting point. I was talking to Kathleen the other day about a magic wand, and if she had one to wave. And her answer is exactly that, about the future and how we have to connect all the systems. And I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about that.
Since we've talked, I've moderated what I wanted to say in answer to your question. His question was, if you had a magic wand, you could make any change happen in the community to affect community ownership. What would that be? And kind of inspired in part by my panelists today, there's a two-part answer to that question. One is, what I love, what I'm hearing is people who love a particular development or a particular neighborhood, falling in love with that neighborhood and being committed to the relationships that need to be forged and fostered in those neighborhoods. And that's what happened in Dudley Street, and that's what's happening in Othello, and that's what happened with the Black and Tan. People just love their neighborhoods and are motivated to do that hard work of relationship. But beyond that, we need to connect as a community. All those people who love what you love need to come together in service of that love and build a bigger coalition, because the voices and the strength of the business community and the large corporate entities and the large for-profit developers, they have the platform. We need to make our voices heard, and we need to set aside kind of some of the differences that we have with each other of, you're not liberal enough, or you're not the right color, or we all need to love what each other loves, which is community and relationship, and fight for the changes that we need at the government level, at the business level, to make community ownership come to scale.
Yes.
I guess what I would say is, if I had a magic wand, I think I would wave it, and all of you all would remember that there are more of us than there are of them. That's all you got to remember.
Amen.
There are more of us. There are more of us that believe the way we do. There are more of us that have things at stake, our families, our children, the air we breathe. There are more of us that believe in this bigger, grander idea of who we can be. And once you have that, once that belief is really deeply embedded in you, you're unstoppable. You are unstoppable. And I think that's what we learned at the Black and Tan, because like I said, we're a for-profit business. We're an LLC. Because, what we've learned is that equity is what the banks tell us is ownership, right? So, we don't have to have the cover of the nonprofit industrial complex or plug into tax codes and be a C3. We really had to tell ourselves that we can be owners and still represent this very aspirational neighborhood that we want to see, right? Earl is evidence of that. For 30 years, a businessman whose business creates community, the thing that we want to see. So if I had a magic wand, you all would believe that all we need is us.
Amen.
Thank you.
I'm definitely inspired by everything that you guys are saying up here. I feel the same in the work that I've been doing. It's always been about community. It's always been about elevating those voices, helping those voices to feel empowered, to to create their own change, to create their own reality, to tell those who say that this reality is actually how it should be, say no, it's actually not, because it's not doing us any good, it's not doing the collective any good. I guess if I had a magic wand, I would like to flip the script and say, wherever you are now here so that perhaps you can walk in someone else's shoes, have some of that empathy, and understand that it's really not about the individual, it's about the collective, because that is how we're going to be able to really make a change and succeed. That would be my magic wand.
Yes.
Well, I do a variety of things, you know. If I had a magic wand, one of the things that is most bothersome to me is to see in this supposedly the richest country in the world, the number of homeless people who are sleeping under our bridges and whatever else. And that there's not even any public policy discussion to get them people. We know it's a combination of lack of jobs, mental health, opiates, and all those things. Well, let's do something to change that. That's what I do first. That'd be my short term. My long term, because it's going to take a little time to do that. Short term, I would ask for that magic wand to impeach Trump tomorrow. And make Okezie Speaker of the House. You know, and then we get together with all young people who have a much greater vision. When I was the mayor of Berkeley, we had to do a community plan for a neighborhood. We hired a professional planning group, but we also hired a group of teenagers who were directed by a professional planner. And the teenagers' plan exceeded the professional older people's plan because their computers are not filled up yet. And they see more things we don't. They walk the streets. If you're going to really plan in neighborhoods, you got to walk the streets with community because you're apt to see more kinds of things. Let's take a little bit of time and grasp that which is necessary. So I'd be a dangerous. Well, if I had a magic wand, I guess my first one would give me 10 more wands. You know,
You sound just like my daughter on that one. So I think that the inspiration here. Let me just wrap this up, and then we're going to take some questions. So start thinking of them. To me, the inspiring thing here is that we have hundreds of people owning their own homes in concert together. We've got 38 people building and owning a restaurant and a cultural center. We've got 68 people who got together and said, hey, we can build a building with Uche's help. And we got, I don't know, how many millions are following your thoughts in the world? But we've got a whole community in Boston for 40 years now doing incredible things together.
And not one housing foreclosure in 2008.
Did you hear that?
Amen.
In 2008, not one housing foreclosure in the Dudley Street. And yes, and apparently we have my work. But we've also got, I don't know, 150 people in this room that took the time out of their day to show up
Amen.
And listen to this and think about what you're doing in your world and get together to actually make a difference. With all of us together, we're unstoppable.
Unstoppable.
Questions? Yes, sir.
I'm going to take one of the mics up to the stand here. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask that folks with questions come up here so that we can all hear.
Oh, there you go. They got to come up to the mic.
Yes. You assume stuff, and I think they have a term for assuming, but anyway, I won't go there.
Something about me.
I was assuming until today, because you learn something new every day, that you guys were going to renovate the historical site. And I see you had to do the same thing that we had to do when we did the African American Academy. It wasn't big enough, so we had to go up on Beacon and Rose Street. So I'm taking my magic wand and Chris and y'all's brain and say, please work with the Little Saigon community and the Historic Central Cultural Arts District to make sure that there's a marker there. Because like I tell the community, if I'm the last black person in the central area, my footprint will be there.
Amen.
Yeah.
Good day,
Hello.
one and all. I'm Tana Yasu, and I am a part of this situation as part of HCAACD, which is Historic Central Area Arts and Cultural District organization. So my question is almost like the short story with the question at the end. These things seem so cyclical, or like a cycle, or like we're just on this treadmill, the kind that maybe the hamster's on, like the way America and the capitalism and all this been working and all of that against, us marginalized people of color and natives and all that. And it's like, yeah, we get these wins, we come in. Even here in Seattle, we had the African American school, we had and all the situation with NAM and just the situation they're trying to take the Central Area Senior Center. So first of all, you redlined us in that area, and then you decided, well, we want that back and you got to do something else. And also, with winning, this is a bunch of stuff put together, but it's all the same, because even with the changing of King County to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King County, and then within maybe I think a decade, we lost affirmative action, which we just got that back last night, yes. So this is basically where I'm going with, like, okay, we come here as chattel slaves, we got through that, and then we're coming up, and then we coming down through Jim Crow and all of that. It's like this cycle, like we gain ground and then we lose the ground. Like the natives, they're doing so well, and it's like, oh, by the way, there's all these indigenous women that just fell off the face of the earth and nobody gives a damn. Like, so we get the wins, but then it's like, if we don't pay attention, how do we when we get these things going, how do we keep that going into the future? It seems like the white supremacist agenda has been standing for centuries, okay? So how come, we need to be thinking forward. Don't say, okay, well, now we got the house, we good, let's kick back. And then people go to sleep, or our elders don't want to talk about the pain because it was so traumatic that you don't talk, but the young people don't know. Look, when you're walking down the street, you can't just walk down the street. You're not just free like they say. That's not what it is. You're still living in a altered society right now today with capitalism. So it's not realistic to me to say we're going to get rid of capital. That's not going to happen. This country is based and born and built on capitalism. That's not going to happen. We need to learn how to use it, work it. We need to put our legacies together and format them in a way that they will go into the future. That's a great idea, bringing those young voters up and getting them involved at a young age. We're always like, don't do nothing until you turn 18, and by the time they turn 18, you can't tell them nothing. So how will we keep our legacy, our ownership, our precedents going?
I don't think you hear anybody going around talking about we're going to get rid of capitalism. Adam Smith's version of capitalism is not the capitalism that's being practiced.
That's right.
That's when I say we don't know our history and we're very undereducated. We need to find facts and analysis and understand what something was really meant to be, not just taken from our perspective, which we think we know, which we don't really know what it is. Let's do that. Let's educate one another. Let's go to the right places. Let's get facts, terms, and things, and then begin to build on that, the dream of a vision that was supposed to happen. Western Europe and other countries have much better social programs and things, welfare, etc., and all those things than we ever thought of happened. How many people in here know that? We're doing a film right now, friends, when I say we don't know anything about history. Part of that film is the last 2 years of Malcolm X's life. I was with Malcolm 4 days before he was assassinated. I worked with him in the last 3 years in creating the Organization of Afro-American Unity. The film will show that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King have become two of the closest friends in the world. How many people in here know that? Because the fact is, the facts is not told to us. We're organizing often from something that we don't really know or understand. So let's begin to learn to educate ourselves before we go stating things and raise questions and this and that and go step by step. And what you'll find out, 35 days before Malcolm was assassinated, there was a meeting at Sidney Poitier's house. Juanita Poitier, A. Philip Randolph, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee, Malcolm X. We had Martin Luther King on the phone in Florida because he'd been arrested once again for demonstrating. Malcolm had just come back from Madagascar and other places. And Juanita Poitier said, Malcolm, now you got to stop calling white people devils. He said, yeah, you promised us to do that. He said, I am. Once in a while I slip. She said, look at you. You got green eyes and red hair, because Malcolm's mother was half white. Malcolm was in a debate at Oxford University with the most brilliant guy on the faculty. And at one point he slipped and said, devil, and the guy stopped and said, I thought you were going to stop saying that, Malcolm. He hesitated for 30 seconds. Then he said, I am, but who's going to replace you? That was buying time. But what I want you to understand, Malcolm had given up nonviolence, went and apologized to Jews and whomever else for some of the things that they used to say because they were taking over Harlem. Oh, there's so much facts in history that we don't know of how love comes to make standards, and he and Martin coming together, etc., whatever else. And Malcolm was prepared coming out of that meeting and agreed to go before the United Nations to file a suit against American hegemony, imperialism, and colonialism. And Martin Luther King said, brother, I'll be there with you to second it. That phone call was tapped by J. Edgar Hoover. And he was heard to say that these are the two most dangerous black men in the world. 35 days later, Malcolm is dead. Yeah. So let us get the facts and understand that love and coming together and beginning to understand and get the true facts of what capitalism and other things is and under what circumstances, how it should be practiced, right, by not just saying go away, because you say go away, that's a negative saying, do away with something. Yep. Then what you going to come back with? Yeah. We see that socialism, or what is it, I forget the term, not democrat socialism, what was practiced in Russia. Communism didn't work, that got wiped out all over the place. Build something from a common perspective, yeah, that allows us to develop and raise a sense of education, impact. I mean, Malcolm's organization, when they were building capital in Chicago and places like that, around communities of businesses and things, all those things were working, but we don't have any study of that. That's not in our textbooks and stuff. Let us find out the practices of the Chinese community. I remember when I was a Martin Luther King fellow for 2 years at MIT. And I taught a course on community benefits agreements. And one of the students in that course was from China. He'd worked for the World Bank and some other kinds of things. And we put together a study for Springfield, Massachusetts, poor community. And we let him present it. He starts out his talk by saying, you know what? I'm working through capitalist systems. But in China, those of us who practice capitalism, we don't believe in long-term loans and things like that. We take our money and incorporate it in finance and talk to the people in this museum how they were able to put together their funding and things. Let's learn from one another. Let's get statistics. Let's get facts and figures and things and begin to understand what it takes to rebuild this society from the ground up. And what happened in Dudley Street, we challenged the banks on redlining. And of course, a couple of nonprofits, we asked for $2 or $3 million. They said, we're never going to admit that. But Steve Coyle had Northwestern do a study that showed 30 years of redlining. Redlining comes out of the New Deal. When we put that in the media and everything else, we sat down with the banks for 18 months. They created an Affordable Housing Community Development Corporation and a Small Business Community Development Corporation. Each bank put up between $500,000 and $1 million towards affordable housing and stuff, put 50% community people on those boards. I was on both of them. And the banks said that what you're doing with this data and stuff is giving us better investments than the investments that we've been making heretofore. Learning has to be done, you all, and we got to do that together. We can't just cite something we've heard somebody say from a propagandistic standpoint or something and think that that is what's got to be done away with. We got to think about what it takes to establish and build.
I just wanted to build on what Gus is saying, that one of the things that wears us out, that takes our energy, is when we focus on what's not working. And I think part of what Gus is saying is that there's a really valid place for critique of what is and that has not been working, but what we need to be about is creating that vision of what we want to create together and being in service of that. We, at Homestead, we convened this little event last fall around the book Owning Our Future by Marjorie Kelly. And she talks about this vision of how we can redefine our capitalist system by having more and more collective ownership, bringing it right back to the community ownership. So collective ownership of businesses and cultural spaces and housing, all kinds of housing. But we have to come together around that broader vision, lock arms and work together to make it happen. And when we do that, I think the positive relationships that we have will help us have that stamina to create the change and keep it going.
I'm going to change the script a little bit. You know, Sam is asking all of us to respond, but Sam is doing some of the greatest work, building new community development finance institutions and whatever else, and we need to hear about some of the stuff you've been doing, brother.
Well, I'll give you 5 seconds on that, and then I think we got to wrap up so that we can get folks back to the real work that they're doing in the world. My thing is really about bringing people together and understanding what our past is, and then changing that in the way that serves everyone, not just the people doing the work, but serves everyone by setting an example for other people to follow. So setting an example for the banks to follow, to say, hey, these people are worth believing in, to set examples for developers to follow, to say, hey, we could do actual community development as opposed to just building development. We could do actual community development and still make money. We can put food on our tables so that we can all have enough. And that's the thing that I'm going to rant about for the next 50 years or until my daughter locks me up in the insane asylum. Again, the inspiration to me is in all the people here together and the force that we have. Community can beat money.
Amen.
Amen.
Sam Farrazaino, Kathleen Hosfeld, Karen Toering, Uche Okezie, Gus Newport, thank you all very much for your time.